It's a really funny story. There were about 6 sell-side technical analysts or people interested in, we weren't called technicians, we were called chartists. Myself and Tony Tabell, an older gentleman named Ken Ward, who worked for a firm called Walston and Company. But let's just say real quick, there were 5 or 6 of us who used to meet downtown Wall Street at a place called Fusco's Bar. And we would exchange ideas, and if one guy didn't like what the other guy was saying, he'd call him a dope. You know, you're an absolute dope, that's not going to work out. And I didn't like the way these meetings went. So when Ralph came back to my office one day, we've been working together now a number of years, and he was so excited about this possibility of a group of technicians getting together. I said, Ralph, I've been there, done that. I said, you either really start this out on a high-level, professional level, and don't just include anybody to be a member because they say they keep charts. I said, maybe I'll be helpful in putting the thing together. And then they of course got Bobby Farrell to be the first president, and I guess I was just there to be the second, and Tony was the third, and we were, I guess, a few of us around then that had been making names for ourselves on Wall Street, so it was a good drawing deal for the MTA to get started with some of us that had some renown, so to speak, to be leading it. I have to say that the business has changed so dramatically since I retired, in the sense that the numbers that we all had to analyze were pretty reliable. Nowadays, though, with trading occurring in back rooms and closets and clouds, even a lot of it doesn't get visually seen on the ticker tape. There is no ticker tape, okay? And I'm really, quite frankly, happy I'm not practicing anymore. I really I have a great admiration for those that are still plying away like my protege Luis Yamada is. But anyway, I'm very proud to be here and have had a hand, obviously, in putting this group together. A lot of memories, a lot of people I've known for years here, and a lot of people I've known, unfortunately, who are not here. Who, this last year, we lost 3 real giants in Bill Diani passing, Marty Zweig passing, and the third fellow, I can't remember. It was actually, I think he was a past president. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here to answer your question. Go with the flow. My first calculator was a slide rule. I used to calculate ratios with the slide rule, and then I went to a Monroe calculator where you had to pull the handle and the wheel went around and the number came up, finally, the answer. And then from there, of course, we went to the computer age. But no, I always used to tell the story with as a bit of a joke, obviously, that you only needed 40 cents as an investment to be a good technician. It was 40 cents for the straight edge and 10 cents for the pencil. Maybe it was 50 cents. It's all you needed to practice. And I got such a kick last night out of the fact that the name tags for the tables were straight edges, were rulers, because that's where I started, with the straight edge and the pencil.
And how did you start out?
Well, I'll tell you a very fast story.
Please.
I was fortunate to have had a boss who was a very sharp market student, and he taught me a lot of my basics, because I was his assistant, his statistical assistant, but I was also a fledgling fundamental analyst. And I had the pleasure in 1960 of publishing a 55-page report of why the food stocks should be looked upon as growth stocks. And I had no idea that my report was going to be published in the middle of one of the greatest bull markets for consumer non-durables in the history of the country. And my stocks doubled and tripled in the next year or two, and I was an instantaneous star of the research department until one day my then boss gave me this book to read on point and figure charting. that had been given to him by a fellow he used to commute from Princeton, New Jersey with. And unbeknownst to him, I started to make up, I found this book fascinating, and I had these charts, of course, hidden in my desk drawer. And in late 1961, going into 1962, the charts the stocks that I was plotting were the food stocks that I had recommended in this report. Started showing up these patterns that page 16 of the booklet said were top formations. And I walked into my boss and I said, how can this be? All my earnings are accurate. And he said, Alan, maybe you're about to learn how to separate a company from the stock. And of course, to this day, that was probably the best advice I could have ever had. You mean, I said, Ralph, the stocks? He said, Alan, the stock market is a discounting mechanism. And the reason your stocks doubled and tripled might be because of the earnings that are being reported today. But what you're seeing on the charts is what psychology is maybe telling you is going to happen in the future. So I said, Ralph, I'm going to take your advice, and we sent out a message to our branch system then that we had no objection if clients wanted to lighten up. We never said sell, right? But lighten up on the things, the stocks we had recommended in this report. And in 1962, the stock market went down 50% within a period of 2 or 3 weeks, and my stocks virtually collapsed. And I said to myself, there's got to be something more to this technical or whatever charting research than I know anything about. And I took it upon myself to read everything I could. And of course, I had the theory in those days too that if I wanted to learn something about the subject, I was going to go out and teach it. So I began a career at the New York Institute of Finance in the early 60s, teaching 2 courses, an elementary class and then an advanced course. And of course, I always loved to have a student ask me a question I couldn't answer, because to get that answer for next week meant I had to learn more about the subject. But that's exactly, how it worked out. And then my firm I was with merged with Smith Barney in 1976, and that was a merger made in heaven because my firm, Harris Upham, was a retail client-oriented firm, and Smith Barney was an institutionally oriented firm. And so I had now the pleasure of really, my market was the institutional sales force, the retail sales force, and my firm, because I sat on the investment policy committee with all the other big shots, the fundamental analysts, the economists, and all that stuff. And I brought a completely different slant to the Thursday morning breakfast, but it was a wonderful experience. About 14 people in the 70s, and everybody pretty much that ever worked with our group was a student. I hired right out of class, as I did Ralph, and I have Rosemary, and Jonathan, and Ron Dano. They were all students, and Bill Raftery. They were all students, and we had different responsibilities within the team. I was kind of like the overseer, but Louise was doing more of the group work. Bill Raftery was doing more of the individual stock work. And Ron was doing more of the fixed income and dollar analysis stuff as we started to branch out from just doing stocks. But we used to keep up to date over 1,000 point and figure charts by hand every day. At a huge round table with a lazy Susan, and the books were this big, of course. And each of those books would hold maybe 100 charts. And they're all A through Z, the New York Stock Exchange. We could. But it was about 14 of us, I guess, at the top, at the height.
And how would you describe the methodology of the team? What were the key tools and what were the key focuses for the team?
Well, we all pretty much, we practiced everything, pretty much. But as new things came along, like RSI, which was like a more up-to-date name for relative strength analysis. We kept point figure charts by hand. We subscribed to all the bar chart services. And then, of course, the computer finally came in and took over. We used to have all these screens around the chart room that we could, like everybody else did, I guess. But you had to learn. You couldn't be left on the lurch if something new was happening. You wanted to be there at the, in on the game, so to speak. So it was fascinating from that point of view. But Alvin Toffler was probably way ahead of his time. He wrote a book called Future Shock back in the 60s. And it was all about the acceleration of the rate of change. And there was no place more exemplified the acceleration of the rate of change than the stock market, which was based on human emotions. And you just had to try to keep up with it. And luckily the technology was there. I mean, I started with a ticket tape. And then, I mean, it used to take me 15 minutes to get a quote from the floor of the stock exchange. I had to go to a special phone and pick it up, and the guy on the floor would answer, yes. I said, what's the last sale on GM? And if he wasn't sound asleep, he'd come back in 2 minutes and tell me 65 and a half. That's the way it was. I think that question was very well answered by this morning's panel about what their biggest mistakes were. I always told my staff, I said, don't you be afraid of making mistakes, just don't make the same one twice. Because you only learn from the mistakes. And like my father, when I flunked out of college in my freshman year, my father said, son, if you don't fail, you never know what success was. And I've been awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from the same school that threw me out in my freshman year because of my, quote, accomplishments in Wall Street without the college degree up front, which was kind of fun. But no, I think it was to make mistakes, don't be afraid, learn from them, and be humble, because the market's man's only creation that humbles him the most. Ralph Rottenham taught me that, and he certainly was correct. Well, I enjoyed meeting so many old friends, clients, colleagues. Of course, my whole staff is here, my ex-staff in most ways. Some are speakers. I think I really just one of my best friends in the world is Ralph Acampora. I mean, we grew up together really, and to this day we stay in touch about once a month or something like that. But a lot of friendships came out of this group.